Okay, so here's our libraries, 34 on one peninsula, which is a lot for one county this size. But we're very learned people here. And we apparently have appropriated money a lot of times over a lot of years. For all this. It's really cool. Other places struggle. And everybody asked me first, why I wrote the book and stuff, and why, and of course the answer is because I love libraries, which probably you guys do too. And I don't know why anybody wouldn't love libraries, but has anybody read the book? I don't want to you have, okay, thanks. I just didn't want to duplicate much information, but one of the first things I say in it is that whenever I would tell anybody I wrote a book about libraries, there were two sets of people. Some would say, most would say, oh. And then the others would go, oh, cool, yeah, that's really cool, neat. And of course, we're in the second group, and with good ones. And why I love libraries is they're different than every place else on earth. They're quiet. I don't like loud things. I don't like people yelling. I don't like people interrupting each other and screaming. And that's what my life has been. That's been me being a quiet person and being surrounded by loud people. So I like libraries because obviously it's an atmosphere where everybody has to behave. Sometimes they don't, but mostly they do. And, being quiet in a library is just, everyone knows that. So automatically it's a nice place. Libraries are safe havens. They're full of books and other fun things. And in a library, I'm not weird. Out there, if you know people who think it's weird that you like libraries, or that you are excited to learn things, or that you just like poking around and learning random stuff. Other people say, oh, I haven't read a book since high school. I don't really know any of those people really, but I come across them, and that's bad. But hey, whatever floats your boat. But I like being part of having kindred spirits, and in the library, it's so wonderful, and it's so polite. Everybody's polite and quiet and interested in stuff that's in books. So, and let's see here. And where else but in the library does anyone trust you to take out hundreds of dollars worth of stuff at any time you want? And then they trust you to bring it back too. And that, of course, that never happens anyplace else. And it's all free. Oh my God, how often does that happen? So libraries are, we all know this, so specifically wonderful in all these ways. And people ask me too, why are there so many libraries on the Cape? Why are there 7 in Barnstable and 5 in, 5 in Denison, 3 in Harwich, 3 in Yarmouth, 2 in Chatham, and then the rest each have 1. And of course, nowadays we drive everywhere, and it's no big deal to drive a few miles to a library, but back in the olden days, of course, it was a big deal. And they also had a lot of village loyalty, some might call it insular, but it's good enough that we have all these, because people always say, why are we supporting all these libraries? Why not just have 1 or 2 big libraries on the Cape? No. To lose any of them would be a significant tragedy, because I guess maybe you could argue that the money might go to other things, but it wouldn't go to the things we want it to anyway. So why not support the libraries? And it is a place people gather at all these different libraries, and they have their little favorite ones. Mine, of course, they're all my favorites, but I have made my list of libraries sort of based on the superlatives I have assigned them. And some are meaningful and some are just my musings, but the first one, okay, this is my and I vote for cutest library. This is South Dennis. And I did not know about this one until 6 or 7 years ago. And I thought I knew all the libraries, but I did not know about this one. And somebody brought me to it and said, this is a library. I was like, oh my God, it's so cute. And the gingerbread and everything and the little pointy shutters. And inside it's really cute too. It's small, it's very small, but it has a couple different sections. The floor, I remember the librarian pointed out the 1860 floor and then the 1927 floor. And yes, there was a difference, but it's so quaint, and it's been painted a million times. And I just love it. I love it because it's an enchanted little cottage out in the middle of nowhere. Dennis itself is interesting anyway, all these different Dennises, South Dennis and Dennisport and everything, and they're not where you think they'd be. I would think Dennisport, South Dennis would be, south, and it's south of something, but it's not south of all of them. Anyway, this has a lot of materials in it, this place, but it's not really crowded, but it's very packed with all kinds of good things. Everybody loves this little library. If you don't, there's something quite wrong with you. And then the next one is, this is North Falmouth, and I voted it best use of an army barracks because that's what it used to be. And somebody in North Falmouth told me that it's this is a very small library too, but that it's better than driving all the way to Falmouth. It's 6 miles to Falmouth to the big library, and that family goes there a couple of times a year. Very strange to me because there's no library too far for me. This one has a bit of an interesting story with it because in back of it is it's a park now, but it used to be an Indian burial ground. And unfortunately, let's see, back in the late 1800s, the Indian cemetery was plowed under in back of the library. And the newspaper account of it, this is what really made me mad. It had the audacity to call it unwittingly, that they unwittingly chopped it all down and dug it all up because they were clearing weeds. And I don't know how you unwittingly disturb graves. I know it wouldn't happen to white people, let's put it that way. And it's true that the headstones are not big. They didn't really do that, but now, of course, much more care is taken, and we have confirmed that some of the artifacts they found in that area are 8,000 years old. So it's extra horrible that all that happened. They can't expand this little library because of that, so no more further desecration anyway. And now they have a nice little plaque and stuff like that, but it scarcely makes up for it. There's a lot of course, stuff like that about the Native Americans on this place. This is South Chatham Library, which is the smallest library we have. And they don't have a computer, several of them don't, and it's not quiet in there. This is one that people are talking a mile a minute about all the books they've read, and the librarians know everybody and what they like, and they order all the stuff and come out with the latest things for them. And it's actually really, really charming that way. I don't mind that kind of loudness. I could live without it, but I can accept that because it's very good natured, and it's not any kind of unpleasantness, which is my goal in life, is to avoid unpleasantness. And here we have Provincetown, and this one used to be the Congregational Church. It's huge. It holds 900 people, 120 pews it did. And eventually it became the Heritage Museum in Provincetown. And in the 70s and 80s, someone named Flyer Santos, don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was a boat builder and designer. He used to teach kids to sail, you know, on his own time, all the time. Anyway, he built what's very, this place is famous for, which is a half-scale, a 66-foot half-scale schooner called the Dorothea Rose. And he built it inside, of course, and there's no way to get it out, which is good because it's a great conversation piece. And now they just pack the books in, especially downstairs where the kids are, all around it. This one, she's with that, and that's a view from up above, obviously, and those white things, they're clouds. Here's the masts and stuff. So the masts stick up 25 feet into the ceiling too. And people love this. They talk about this all the time. It's well known everywhere. Other solar systems discuss this. And also, yeah, there's the clouds. Those also dampen the sound from all the commotion down below with the kids and stuff. They say it dampens it. I don't really know about that, but it's cute that way. And yeah, this guy Flyer, he lived to be 100, and he owned Flyer's boatyard up there for 70 years. And this library has a particular huge section of books and stuff on LGBTQ issues and bullying. They go to schools and do all that sort of thing. And they also have a free food pantry in the library. They have a couple of refrigerators that you can bring stuff and take stuff, and that's another way they support them, especially on the off season. It can get pretty gloomy up there, pretty poor. And there's another one. That's such a neat. Did I call it the Dorothea Rose? It's the Rose Dorothea. But that's okay. And don't you love these light poles, like on the edge of a dock or something? That's really cool. Now this one is the Jonathan Bourne Library. This is the original one. And this had one of those quirky sort of, it had, oh yeah, that was right, the quirkiest benefactor. That's what this one is famous for. The person who built this, or had it built, was named Emily Bourne, and she dedicated it to her father, and the other thing she dedicated to her brother. So she basically lived to make shrines to her male relatives, and she was very unassuming herself. She never talked in public. She went to all these unveilings and stuff of her works, but she wouldn't say a word. And she had a lot of idiosyncrasies, which were used against her when eventually she died, and left most of her money. She left a small amount to her relatives. She had a couple of nieces and nephews, like $10,000, and she had millions, of course, and this was way back in the 20s. But they were very mad about the whole thing, and they dragged it through the courts and through the New York Times, and they managed to think up every single rotten thing they could think of, most of which were pretty tame. Like to prove that she was incompetent, like that she used to like to sleep wrapped up in flannel like a mummy. I don't know why that's such a crime, but it didn't go over well with her relatives, who thought that proved that she wasn't of sound mind. And it says here that even a young nurse to whom Emily Bourne had given an automobile was compelled to testify on behalf of the will contest that her employer sometimes repeated herself. The nurse was quick to admit that Bourne wasn't insane when she gave her the money or the car, though. But after that, she went insane. And yeah, people are rotten about money, but we all know that. So, oh yeah, so that one, that's the really neat one. Unfortunately, that got taken down to make the Cape Cod Canal. And now it's part of this, it's rather this entire school. I'm sorry about that. And it's obviously much bigger, much more spread out. It's quite nice inside. And they have a lot of programs, but actually all of the libraries do, so I'm not gonna be mentioning those because it would take forever. And we all know that anyway, so. And the next one is Harwichport. This one is very small from the outside. This is an old postcard, obviously, but it has this really neat community building stuck on the back. And inside is, it's actually painted this kind of blue here. I wouldn't have called that the right, it's got a little bit gloomy and dark inside, but it does have some really neat hardware. All the hinges, there's millions of cabinets in there, and all the little hinges and stuff are wrought iron original. And it has 3 fireplaces. And this is the one that a French marquis, whose name escapes me at the moment, I don't think I could pronounce it, that's why I didn't bother writing it down here. But he donated $1,000 in 1923 to get this started. He was a friend of one of the people who spearheaded this. It's almost always women back then. It was the women who wanted these things in the library. So, in fact, I can only think of one other that wasn't one that was a man. That was in Chatham, but we'll get to that anyway. So, a 1927 article in Cape Cod magazine described this community room as having a dainty kitchen with dainty dishes, not just plain white and serviceable, but of pretty colored patterns. And you just wonder, you know, that's what they take away from this library, that the dishes were dainty, but I like it anyway. That's another quirky sort of thing. Oh yes, here's the back of this postcard. This one wasn't terribly interesting, so I didn't write it down, but here in Harwichport, just for the weekend. What's interesting to me is, first of all, it only costs a penny, and second, that there's actually postcards of libraries. And I have not seen a postcard of a library. It's always, you know, beaches and stuff like that, or silly sharks with hats, but it'd be nice to sort of start that over again, maybe have a municipal building postcards, and you can sell anything that says Cape Cod on it. I know that for a fact. So I'm gonna think about doing that. And here's the outside of it, very pretty little place. And that's the big thing in the back right now. That's right, it has, they rent it out to a dance studio now, that's back part, and they used to have all kinds of dances and stuff in there. Red Cross dances were a big thing back in the 40s. So yes, I would call this the best World War II library because they had all kinds of USO and things like that. And I can just picture it now. It's kind of forlornish, but it's the stories I heard were they had a great time there, and I just picture them doing all those dances in the 40s, and yeah, anyway, I like that one too. Okay, and the next one. By the way, you can ask questions at the end. Amy said it would be better if we waited till the end. So this is Mashpee, and Mashpee was first library on Cape Cod to take advantage of the Library Act of 1891, which was trying to get everybody to have a library. And so the state was giving away $100 worth of books and some other advantages like that to start a library in every town. And Mashpee was the first one on the Cape. They all followed suit pretty fast, but they got right in there. And it's had a few locations. This is the, sorry. This one, they built this in 1987, this small, which was crazy. When I first moved here, right around that time, I was shocked they would put so much money into something so tiny, and they outgrew it right away. It's been a long time coming. They added this really wonderful 22,000 square foot addition, or rather they kind of redid the whole thing, swallowed up the little one. And they are the ones almost the only ones on the Cape, certainly with this type of size collection, Native American books by and about Native Americans. And that's, of course, it's the Wampanoags are based in Mashpee, so it's really good to see, because one thing that has driven me crazy doing this research is almost every, I would say every, but I don't want to be caught out, almost every one of the town's websites starts off with when it was founded, you know, in the 1600s, and of course, no, the Europeans came here and ruined everything at that point, or, well, that's just one way of looking at it, but anyway, this whole place was founded long before that, we know that, but why they keep saying that, I don't know. In this day and age, any day and age, so it's really nice when that Mashpee recognizes that, and their website does not say that. They mention about the European takeover. And let's see, it's really pretty inside. That's the staircase when you first come in. Much different than the little teeny tiny one. And they have all kinds of space for things, and that's the outside. And the children's room. It's really cute. A lot of good space. Whoops, I love the children's rooms too. I always have to visit the children's room, because I remember, you know, when I was a child going to my hometown library, which was a Carnegie library, which I not even know until I started this project. I didn't know that whole time that my little hometown library in Ashland, which is a beautiful place, or at least it was. I haven't been back there, and they've renovated too. So I think I don't want to go. I don't want to see it. It was so beautiful before, and I don't like it when things are changed that much. And there's one coming up that's just really sad. So anyway, the next one here is the Yarmouth Fort Library. Now, is that the beautiful? That is so beautiful. That's amazing. It's a Gothic or Second Empire architecture, and talk about spooky, huh? It's, if you look very close, you can't really see it, but there's somebody in the doorway there, like clearing out. And nowadays, of course, libraries are friendly and welcoming, and this one just does not look like that. Looks particularly threatening, but I just adore it. That's from 1871. And then it wins my little award for best at rescuing the last remaining Gothic features of itself. It has a couple of some metalwork still inside, a couple of spiral staircases and things like that. But basically, it was magnificent, and now it looks like that. In the 50s, they'd have to change a few things because of repairs, damage. It had some rotten stuff, but come on, it didn't have to look like that. It's not nice of me to say, but to go from such a beautiful Gothic architecture and then to have that, it's that's tragic. But they did the best they could, I guess, under the circumstances. That's slightly better, more cheerful. That's the original porch thing there, but isn't there it is. That's another postcard of it. Isn't that beautiful? I love that. By the way, they wouldn't let me use this picture, Yarmouth Historical Society. They fought me tooth and nail, but I found another source for it. Luckily, some library in Methuen actually has a wonderful collection of library pictures and postcards, and they let me use it, but the one down here would not. And they never would say why either. That was frustrating, but I'm not complaining, not too much up. It's a gloomy day, gloomy library, but. And here's what's down at the opposite, at least inside. West Falmouth is the best private library to keep itself pure and dignified. This place is gorgeous inside. It's all wood floors and oriental rugs and all kinds of civilized things, and it's really pretty. And it's another one that nobody knows about. Not nobody, but it's West Falmouth, like really all villages here, is very I wouldn't say insular, but you get what I mean. And so really only people from West Falmouth go there, and me, and maybe you guys, but it's not well known, and therefore they haven't changed it, and a lot to accommodate the crowds. It's a private. It is not private anymore, but they do have to raise about a third of its yearly budget, and they do all kinds of garden tours. There's a wonderful garden next to this library called Jane's Garden, named for a librarian who died, but she has all these plants. She had all these plants in it that she kept all the seeds from, and people can take these seeds and have their own really neat heirloom plants and stuff. And this one also has an interesting to me, little bit of a history, because it started off on the second floor of a tag factory in West Falmouth. West Falmouth is very small, and you wouldn't think there'd be a tag factory there. This is a long time ago, when 400 people, which is virtually the whole village, were employed to tie pink strings onto merchandise tags. And then they were paid 12 to 17 cents per bundle of 1,010 tags. I don't know why they got 1,010, but that's okay. And that's what they did. Eventually it burned down, and they moved the whole thing to 28A. It's right across from the Quaker Meeting House. And if you get a chance, you gotta go in there. It's beautiful. West Dennis, this is around 1925, and that it's the little building on the right with the Palladian window there. That is the library. And of course, it became too small pretty fast, so it stayed there for quite a while, actually, now that but by 2003, it had a couple of renovations, and in 2003, they moved next door to the far left building, which is it was a dress shop, and they just dragged everything over there and set it up, and it's nice, but it's not the cute little ones. I like the cute ones. And now they have, I like them too, because they have a Read to Puppies event. Oh, can you think of anything more fun than reading to puppies? And they have an annual Mother's Day tea again, also civilized tea, little teacups, love it. And West Yarmouth, this one was a tribute, its best tribute to a daughter who died young, Harold Cassier. His daughter Anne died at 17 of an unknown heart ailment, and he spent the rest of his life making not shrines, but definitely naming things after her, and scholarships, and the library is dedicated to her. It started out as an elementary school in the late 1800s, and it started with 400 donated books. And its bylaws said that locals and strangers could borrow a book the locals for 1 cent and the strangers for 2 cents. And later the term strangers was amended to summer guests. It was open 1 hour a week, and the librarian earned $10 per year. And this one, another beautiful library. That's the Snow Library in Orleans. And this one wins my Ramp Award for the best example of a destitute child making it big and giving back to his hometown. David Snow lived, I think it said something like in the wilderness around Orleans, and then and he was, his father, his father died when his mother was still pregnant with him, and she had other kids too, and they were starving all the time. They lived in incredible poverty, and they were freezing all the time. It's quite a long, involved tale, and he wanted to rescue his family, so he did everything he could. He went to sea, and he eventually bought the wharf in Boston, Centennial Wharf, I believe. So he was managed to be a big real estate mogul. And before all that happened, he had this library built, and that was in this one opened in 1877. But unfortunately, it burned down during the blizzard in 1954. And this is another one where, oh my goodness, what they made of it. Oh, well, that's not that. That's good. That's another view of that before the tragedy. Oh yeah. I can't not put these in because somebody wrote this 100 years ago. Yeah, 1921. And wouldn't they be surprised that here we are reading their writing 100 years later? I just find that fascinating. Maybe someday my postcards will end up there. So this is the poor Snow Library now. And what a difference. It is across the street. It's on a different lot, but from the other one. But you have to wonder why people think this is equivalent. These designers, again, this is nice of me to say no, but it's not nice to do that to a beautiful building either. It is good on the inside. It's not very fancy looking or anything, but it does have a gallery and a performance space, and they do have a lot of materials there. But sad. And here we are in Sandwich. I lived in Sandwich for about 25 years, and I loved their library. It's quite changed now, but this is when the Westons, which they were a glassmaking family, and they had this built. It's an example of faux art architecture. This was from 1910 when it was built. It was dedicated in 1911, and then. I love this picture of this woman sitting outside. This was from shortly, I think, 1912. And his high button shoes, with little buttons on them. And I just love the idea that she couldn't wait to get home to read. She has to read there. Because I do that. I sit in my car in the parking lot. Every time I go into a library, I get a stack of books. And I can't wait to get them home. I have to, oops, sorry. I don't read them all, but I definitely have to look at them all in the car. Now I listen to audiobooks a lot, which is the way I get to read, because I don't really have a lot of time, but I intend to. I can't wait. When I'm actually fully retired, that's what I'm gonna do. In fact, usually when I have time on, like a vacation, I don't know why I'm telling you this, I get one day where I get to stay in bed and read all day. And that is fun. That's the other side of the library. I don't know, that's the same side. There's another one. This is now. It's very pretty. I love all the brick and the little jagged stonework there. That's an example of faux arts. And this is the other side. This is a new edition from the 60s, not very new. And then this is, they get my award for best terminology for its recent transformation. Now, to us, that looks like 4 chairs. They call this, where is it now? I want to make sure I get it right. It's so silly. It's a collaboration area. It's not a group of chairs. That's a collaboration area. They are nice and they are very interesting. And then, and this whole renovation was called space reallocation. They kept the footprint of the building, but they rearranged stuff, and that's called space reallocation. Not that I'm against this funny terminology, it amuses me, but if it's not said with tongue in cheek, it gets to be a little bit in between. And this thing here, this is called a tech bar. What it is a counter with stools, and it has all kinds of plugs. Very handy in a library, but calling it a tech bar. And yeah, this is a very nice stone book outside. It's with a quote by Mary Oliver on it, which I actually not going to mention because I can't quite quote it, and I thought I had it written down. Oh, I think it's here. So I might as well tell you. And this was a gift of the Teakin's bookshop in Sandwich, which it's very nice of them to give to a library because they're sort of in competition. But anyway, the quote on here, sorry about that, is, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" From The Summer Day by Mary Oliver, and was presented to the library in 2017. And so the space reallocation. Oh yeah, this is the children's room, has these little portholes, which kids are always peeking out of. It's so cute. My son would have loved that. And all right, we'll go back. The last thing about Sandwich was, oh yeah, so back in 2004, Sandwich was the only library on the Cape to not be part of CLAMS. They instead chose to go with Auckland, which is the old Colony Library Network, and that caused quite a furor. There was a lot of stuff in the paper about it, letters to the editor and stuff about how unfortunate that was. But I was in a regular library, just outside of Sandwich, and somebody mentioned something about it. Anyway, they said that they hoped Sandwich would be sorry one day, and very, like it was a betrayal, and there's this vitriolic diatribe about how dare they do that and everything. And I said, but then you get access to all these other libraries off the Cape, because you can order stuff from Quincy or whatever. It's 29 other libraries in that system, and then it will just be sent to Sandwich, and then you can go pick it up. And this librarian looked at me squinty-eyed and just walked away. I didn't put that in the book because I didn't think that was very nice. It wouldn't be nice of me to say that, but it did happen. And there's a lot of peninsular solidarity here. We know this. We all love the Cape, and we all wanted to stay the same and everything, but when somebody deviates like that, it's considered deviant. And I've heard this many times since then. No, Sandwich has never been forgiven for this, I don't think. And nobody would talk to me on record about it, even in Sandwich. They said, "Oh, I don't remember that." And I go, "You were working here then." "Oh, was that?" They wouldn't talk. They would not talk about it. So I didn't want to be a traitorous and put it in a book like that, because nobody would talk on record anyway. So the next one, we'll skip down to Woods Hole. And this one is beautiful. I don't particularly like the library itself, but oh, the outside is so wonderful. This is a postcard from 1944. And he wrote on it, I'll read this one, Corporal C. Ricardo or Ricards Richards. Anyway, he was on an Army crash boat in Woods Hole. "Hello, Mother. Hope this card finds you all well. We'll tell you more later. Love, from Francis." From 1944, and you just wonder, I hope he made it home. But again, he was, oh, and he got this free. He didn't have to pay the penny because he was in the armies there. So that was an interesting. And yeah, they're right across from the Woods Hole Steamship Authority, and people often well, they try to park there. There's no parking in Woods Hole, in case you didn't know. There are literally 142 legal parking spaces in Woods Hole. That's nothing. And if you go to the library, I don't know, always have a terribly hard time finding a place to leave the car, but it is worth it if you can, because it's next door, at least, is the Woods Hole Historical Museum. And that's a lot of fun in there. Okay, and this one is Dennisport. And I call this biggest new library in a town that already had 4 libraries. And I do wonder how it got passed to build this and spend so much money. But it's a very good library. I call it a serious library because it's not particularly fun or anything, and inside is nice, but it's just kind of generally modern. It's not historically cute, but it has tons of stuff. And they have all kinds of extra things, like certainly museum passes and things, but a pretty good catalog of other things to borrow, which is true now of a lot of them. You can actually borrow bakeware. Did you know this? Cupcake pans, honestly. And things like telescopes and all that sort of educational stuff. But each library has a thing called a library of things. And it's good to look this stuff up because almost anything you'd ever need, you could actually take out of a library. And if you need to make cupcakes fast, that's pretty good. So this is a nice library to actually look up stuff, but it's not terribly interesting that way. Again, should I be saying this? Probably not. And here's Truro. This one does not exist anymore. But this is one of those very old, little teeny tiny thing. This is what it looks like now, and it's much nicer. And inside, I call it the most whimsical library interior. It has a seed catalog, and not a paper one, but an old card catalog filled with packets of seeds that you can take out. You don't have to return them either, you use them. And the next one is this paper mache jester that kind of leans over the circulation deck. And I particularly like the lighting in this one. I'm very sensitive to lighting too, as well as sound. I'm kind of a handful that way, but the interior lighting is very wintry. It always seems like it's winter in there because of the skylights and the reflections and stuff. And I actually quite like it, especially in a hot summer day. And Weldon. Now, Weldon Library is in West Barnstable. And I don't know if you can quite tell, but that little windmill on top, the little weather vane rather, is a little sculpture of a boy reading to his dog. Like, you know, yeah. So I, of course, like anything having to do with dogs, and I had never noticed it. Well, and then I read about it and had to go to take pictures of it. I definitely like that one. The Weldon Library is. Now this one has an interesting, it's a library that owes its existence to a bossy spinster in a pony cart. So Martha Weldon, Lee Weldon, sorry again, was a character, definitely. And she was described as, well, she was a very feisty school teacher. And the Barnstable Town Report reminisced in 1949 that when the big boys of the 1850s, 60s, and 70s were turbulent under men teachers, Miss Martha Lee Weldon was brought to schools in Barnstable and Yarmouth to quickly set schools to rights and establish a high standard of order in the schoolroom. So she was scary, and she got things done. And one of the things she did was invest in this library. She also, it's kind of a long story, but anyway, she had a lot of philanthropic stuff she did. And she invested in the state industrial school, which was the first reform school for girls in this country. It was in Bridgewater. And she served, the girls would serve as maids on the Cape. So she would go up there and bring them back and, you know, have them trained as maids and stuff. And she would go on these visits in her pony cart to inspect their progress. And when she showed up, you were scared. So, but again, she got things done. And let's see here. This library is also interesting, and it has quite a big collection of Finnish books, because in the 1800s, there were a lot of immigrants from Finland, and they brought books with them, and they wanted books to read in their native language. So it still does have a lot of Finnish books. And outside too, in the back, they have a little, it's called a little black pantry. It's a set of drawers, actually, like an old filing cabinet, but it's not rusty or anything. Anyway, people can donate non-perishable foods, and then other people can just go take them, and it has a little sign, give or take. If you have less than you usually do, take. If you have more than you need, give. Thank you. And that's a nice little thing to do, and it's also anonymous, and nobody has to see if you need to take some things out of the perishables, non-perishables. Oh yes, and this is the same one. It has a nice little bench, and it's a very beautiful little place. And here we are in South Yarmouth. This is the library on Bridge Street. Isn't that interesting? They're a social library. These people. They started around. This one was started in 1869. Was there for several decades, and finally they moved to its current incarnation on Old Main Road. Looks like that. And here in the foreground, there's a pump and some concrete thing underneath is a horse trough from the old days, of course, and nothing people ride up on their horse now, but I love that they kept that. And inside, this building was built in 1816, and it gets my vote for having the most uneven and wonderfully creaky floors. It creaks in there, and that's cool. I just like that. So, and the history of this building, it changed hands, maybe 20 times since it was built. To all these people with fascinating names like Zenas Wood, and stuff. These things amuse me. And it has a good vision statement too. Sometimes they seem so kind of cloying and disingenuous, but this one I particularly like. It says, the Yarmouth Town Libraries serve all residents of the community as they seek facts and ideas for life, as they read for pleasure, as they become informed citizens of a free society, and as they prepare themselves for the future. Skilled library staff members develop collections, provide both local and remote resources, and efficiently manage the library needed to effectively meet public's needs. I thought that was pretty well said. Okay, well, late. I'm doing the time there again now. Okay, wealthy. This one is the library most determined to still exist after terribly bad luck. It moved 4 times before it burned down the first time in 1909, and it found a few more sites around town until it was destroyed by fire again in 1960. And its current location, that's it, was a shop that made curtains exclusively for Sears Roebuck. Itself so long gone that we wonder. And so, yeah, they made curtains, and then it became the home of Colonial Candle. It was renovated over a period of many, many years to Like, I think it took 12 years. I don't know why it took that long, but it smells nice in there. And it's really quirky inside too. That one has a rowboat hanging from the ceiling, not quite like P-Town, but still, it's a very packed full library, with lots of interesting things to look at all over the place. And Chatham, Eldridge Library, don't you love this? I like anything that looks that interesting. So, the Eldridge Library. This one has quite a terrible sort of history that I also didn't put in my book because it was thoroughly discussed in another book, and I don't know that I can trust everything that was said in it. And I did put in that one of the library presidents, actually, she held almost all the jobs simultaneously, which you have to wonder might be a bit of not too many checks and balances in that library, and it showed they had financial ruin several times, and she had a reputation of being pretty mean and very, very controlling. She wouldn't let anybody else buy books or decide about what books to get or anything. And she was a relative of the one who started this library, Marcellus Eldridge, and actually a kind of aside, she was a niece of his. And when somebody put her forward for the job, they said it was kind of like the bloodline, to keep the bloodline going, as if that made her eligible for this job. But she was pretty awful. And like I said, I don't feel really nice about discussing her, and I didn't put her name in the book because she could have relatives. This other book, it's called Chatham, the First 100 Years or something, does not mince words. And I don't know if that's necessarily the nicest thing. It's one thing to make fun of the buildings, but as far as the people, I just couldn't do it. Inside this library, it's just gorgeous. The outside's gorgeous too. But there it is when it's all covered with vines and things. That's from 70s, I believe. So they take them down occasionally because it weakens the bricks and stuff. Here's the inside. It's so beautiful in there. Those are some stained glass windows dedicated to the people who furthered publishers back in the 1700s. I have their names, but you don't care. This is a beautiful place with all kinds of neat woodwork, and it's very well maintained, and it's very spectacular. A little table with an alcove and a clock. So Eldridge was one of the most cooperative libraries. Now, here's another thing I probably shouldn't say. I'm doing it anyway. Some of these libraries here were not that cooperative. Some of them just would not talk to me. And I don't really know why. They wouldn't answer emails. Not all of them, but plenty. Chatham was one of the ones that just loved talking about the library and stuff. And I really appreciate that. Because well, for obvious reasons. It's just, I don't really know why some people wouldn't discuss anything with me, but maybe it's me. In any case, Adam was a good one. And here we are in Hyannis. Oh, and this one through Osterville, wonderful. And I had a friend here on the staff who encouraged me to come speak. And this, by the way, is my very first time doing this. So I was a little bit nervous at first, and now you're very attentive, nice audience, and so thank you. And anyway, here we are. So we're back in Hyannis now. This is another one that was built as a private home first. This was my award for most examples of architectural errors in one library. which is, you know, a nice way of saying, what a mishmash of, but it's still, that's more interesting than, you know, some little strip mall library or something, so. It started out in 1750, and it was eventually the post office, and became the actual library in 1908. And a new wing, which was more modern, but nowhere near like it is now, was added in the 1930s by an innkeeper for $8,000. Of course, the prices of these things are fascinating. And then in 1974, somebody donated money to have a very large, ultra modern edition. And the public was outraged at the thought of it because it is so different. See if we can, well, that's another one. The original on the left and then the second one to the right. And that looks perfectly nice. And oh yes, this is 1946. They had an outdoor reading area that I just found that old photo and thought that was neat. And here we are starting with, this is the new edition in the back there lit up with the ones in the foreground, the originals. And people were unkind about this, this edition. They called it a modern monstrosity, and yeah, it seems a little harsh, but they did have this, they do still have this staircase inside, is like the staircase on the Brady Bunch. That's, you know, you can see through the steps, and you wouldn't believe how many times I hear people complain about that. I don't like that staircase. It feels like you're gonna get sucked underneath. And I'd avoid it too if I thought that. They do have an elevator. Anyway, so they have all these tall windows, and it's so different than the rest of it. But they're gonna change it now again, but I don't have a lot of information on that. Let's see, oh yeah, that's right. There's a librarian there who was in the position for 40 years. And she said that prior to 1895, it was the custom for all books to be covered in brown paper and to protect the bindings. And so everything looked the same. And then it was a great day when they voted to discontinue the practice because readership and circulation went up a lot, because if you walked in and saw all this brown paper, it's just not as interesting as having all the colors, full shelves and covers on the shelves. I didn't even know that about the brown paper, but it sort of makes sense. And here we are in Falmouth, which has the best dome, and the Yellowstone exterior is nice too. This one has a kind of a little bit of a sad history, because it was a memorial. It is a memorial to the Civil War, people who died in the Civil War. And they appropriated $25,000 to create this thing. And when it went over budget, what does not go over budget, it went up to 32,000. And all of a sudden, the comments started flying in the paper about, no, just build it for 25. It doesn't matter what it looks like. And they had all these wonderful plans to have it look like this. Eventually they won, but there was a lot of bad feeling about the whole thing, that it went over budget, and that when it came time to bury a time capsule under the keystone, nobody went to it. There was no one there, and they had chosen all these neat things to put in this time capsule, like newspapers and coins and photographs and all kinds of stuff. And no one went to the ceremony. There wasn't really a ceremony. They just, so I don't know. I just think that's unfortunate. And here's the dome. It's the seal of the town of Falmouth, and very beautiful. This is another example. They used to have marble floors, and it was great. And they carpeted everything, which did actually make it nice and quiet. And that part I approve of, but you lose something with indoor outdoor carpeting. It's just unfortunate. And
We're going to Spain, I did research.
let's see, here we are in Chase, West Harwich. Now this is less than a quarter mile away from the Dennis let's see. Dennisport Library, yes. There's Dennis Memorial, West Dennis, South Dennis, and Dennisport. So this one is just 2/10 of a mile away, but it's over the line, just over the line in West Harwich. This is Chase Library. And this one has the best children's room for a tiny little library. And it has the best fireplace too. There it is, what it looks like today. This has not changed virtually at all. And they have all the wood inside is cypress. And the ceilings are embossed steel. The floors are polished marble. Well, this is the wood section, but, and the ceiling lights, which I'll show you in a minute. Go back. The ceiling lights are original to 1910. So over the mantle here is one of the founders, Salome Chase. And that dress, she also wore, this was painted in 1897, but she wore it to Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in 1887. And her husband too was Chase of Chase and Sanborn Coffee. That's where his money came from, among other things, but he was the first one to store coffee, or rather sell it in cans, which kept it fresh and stuff. So he made a fortune with that, and he funded this whole library, and he was a great philanthropist as well. Here's the little children's section. It's so small, but it's really cute. And I guess the kids could come and read to the teddy bears. And I would like a life where, not so much of a life, although an existence where that happens all the time. It's just teddy bears being read to. That's great. Yeah, there's the lights and the Chase Library. Anything's original in the fireplace. Oh, very beautiful. And we're in Sturgis now. I'm going to speed this up because it must be done. Okay, so the Sturgis Library, which is on 6A in Barnstable, is the most like an actual museum. They have all kinds of fun things there. They have a self-guided tour that you can take, and they have a Bible from the 1600s there under glass, and Reverend John Lothrop started this one. He came here from England. He was in a dungeon in England for quite a while because he tried to start his own church there, and the king did not approve. And eventually threw him out of England too. And he came here, fought with other people in Scituate, and ended up in Barnstable and built this house in 1644 for his 12 kids. And one of his great-great-grandsons, named William Sturgis, bequeathed it as Barnstable Public Library in 1863, and then they named it after him. Very beautiful inside also. There's all kinds of oil portraits of rather grim-looking folks, but they're beautiful anyway. And all of its furniture is from that era as well. Here's the Bible. 1600 is a long time ago, and that's one of the Sturgises. Yeah, this a good story about him fighting pirates and winning. And the children's room has a whale sculpture, and that table is also from like 1750 or something. It's really old, and yet they have it upstairs. I just think that's cool. We're in the Brewster now, the Brewster Ladies Library, which has the best retro name to survive political correctness. It was started by 12 young women as a subscription library, and that men could take out books, but they were charged more. What a shame. And maybe because the books wouldn't last as long when they're rough handling, but who knows why. And there were some rumblings in the late 70s to change the name, but they stuck to it, and I'm glad, because, oh, and isn't she neat there in her white dress? That was from about 19 15, I believe. And now it looks more like that. You know, very big. And Marston's Mills. Marston's Mills, there's not a lot to say about this one. It has the best slogan. You can borrow a book, but you get to keep the ideas. That's kind of cute. And this village, sorry, I did that. This village, I talk about the village a lot, and because it's not a lot to say about the library. It's a little library, but the village itself is quite interesting because it had a lot of mills in it and a lot of industry that you never heard of, like lime. They made quick lime from oyster shells which was used as stick mortar to make it stick together, and a host of other things. And it's a charming little place, but it's a little bit ordinary, but it's certainly good. Centerville Library, isn't that pretty? This one was started by free thinkers who needed a place to think. In 1846, someone spoke about non-church related topics inside the vestibule of the Congregational Church, not even in the main part, and that caused a commotion. So he got others to help him build Liberty Hall, and it's quite a chain of events to get to this place, but this was from 1897. Eventually they built this library, and this one is also a postcard. It says, "Well, right when I'm in the mood. We have just been in bathing with a boy from the next cottage. He is a senior in the West Roxbury Latin. Too funny for anything, with love." I just have to include it, like I said, because somebody wrote it, and here we are 100 years later, and 110 years later talking about it. And so, in the 1950s, this building was picked up and moved around the corner, and now it's a parsonage. And then they made this, again, not as interesting, but certainly serviceable. And a recent renovation, that's pretty too. And they don't call it a collaboration area. Some chairs in front of a fireplace. And here's the vaulted ceiling, very pretty. They did a good job with this one. East Falmouth has the best repurposing of a normal family house with a sunken living. It's from the 70s, and they didn't get, a little library moved around the town, was closed during World War II because they couldn't afford to heat it with rationing, and now they have this. They bought this little house, it's like children's room. It's small, but it's very beautiful, beautifully appointed on lawn. And then that's the sunken living room part. These lights are cool. Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't have the picture here, but they have stones outside, big giant blocks of granite that have came from a flume in a nearby cranberry bog, and the stones have marks from a star drill hand tool that masons used over 100 years ago, and now they have them as benches in a reading garden outside this place. Dennis Memorial, that's dedication to residents who died during World War I. Began in 1924, and it's a random collection of rooms. Another one that's not a lot to say about it. That's how big it is from the other side. And we do have a lot of specialty equipment to enable the visually impaired to read. And a lot of Cape Cod authors, of course, all libraries have Cape Cod authors here, but they have an extra big collection. And Kituitt Library, that's the best children's film. This is from the early 1900s, but here it is again. And Jamie, who was the librarian, her quote was, "Live the life you dreamed, grow." So this is a beautiful little library. That little window there, that's in the children's room, and it definitely has for the children, so which I don't think I got a picture because it's both kids and you can't take pictures of kids. So this is, their main section here. That's the guy Kirkman, who funded this library, the incarnation of it. And he was famous for having Kirkman's pure white soap flakes in the 1920s. And he made a fortune and then sold to Colgate and became basically a billionaire. And now, one of his old factories is made into condos, and they sell for like $5 million each. And they kept the silos inside, big, rusty, gigantic silos that the soap flakes used to be in, and they cost more. People want the rusty silo in the middle of their condo. But then, according to Imperial, in books, we're almost to the end here. This one's unfortunate. This is the huge library. It was a big, city block of all kinds of different things, stores and people who sewed and a miller. And there was a courthouse here inside. Now this one, that's another view. So there's there was a courthouse on the second floor, and here is the judge's bench. They kept that as their circulation up there. And that thing to the left, it's kind of like a book cupcake. It was it's called a born settee. It's basically a lobby sofa round thing. The hotels and stuff. They couldn't get it out. There was no way to get the thing out, so they kept it. And they covered it with books and they decorated for different things. And of course, I just find that hilarious because, and they have like little starfish hanging, and at Christmas, of course, it's a tree and stuff. Oh yeah, so the bad thing that happened here, there are these statues. These are by John Rogers. He was a sculptor in the late 1800s who he portrayed different Americana things, kind of like pre-Norman Rockwell, all kinds of little scenes of things, like, men around the Cracker Barrel, and people getting haircuts, and, kids riding horses and stuff. All these, they're quite beautiful. These are some philosophers and stuff. And so all these statues, they had 69 of them. And unfortunately, back in 1976, the Globe ran a story about these statues. And shortly after that, somebody broke in and stole them. And the library did not have a security system. They weren't even insured. And some unfortunate souls went in and took the curtains down and wrapped all these statues in, and they're very fragile, wrapped them in the curtains and drove away. And one artwork, one of them has been found since. It was well recovered. Somebody left it at the town dump, the swap shop there, with a rolled up an article about the theft, like a printout of it stuck in the under the arm of the statue. So they wanted it to be recovered, but they weren't going to admit to it, of course. So it's only one, and it's really too bad. I didn't put all this in the book either. I didn't even mention it because it's we feel terrible about it, even though, and it's a painful thing because these are worth a fortune, an absolute fortune. And John Rogers, Brooks Library in Harwich. And they were cast plaster from bronze, and so they were mass produced, but not that many exist anymore, so they're still very, very valuable. So that's a shame. They have a cute children's library too. And I love these things with what I want. All my books to be on stands like that. There's all around the place. And okay, we are now at Jacob Sears. This is more after this. So the Jacob Sears Library in East Dennis is one I actually have never been to. And when I found that out, I was shocked to my very innards because I pride myself on having been to all the libraries. I don't know how I missed it, but I went zooming out there and came upon this thing. It is so cute. Came out much smaller than I thought. And here it is now. It's a chateau type thing. And it's so hidden. I call this the most amazingly secret library on the Cape, because it's tucked away in a side street in East Dennis. And it's only open like 9 to 1 for 3 or 4 days a week. But it's beautiful inside. There it is. It has a stage that Betty Davis performed on when she was 19. She was in the Cape, she was an usher at the Cape Playhouse in Dennis, and they let a bunch of the ushers and stuff put on a show, and it was very well received, and they performed it at 3 or 4 other places on the Cape too. So she was only 19, and around that fireplace there are these tiles that depict some of the 8 clipper ships that were built in Shiverick's boatyard, which doesn't exist anymore, but it took years and years. I mean, to build clipper ships back then, even now, would be quite hard, and it was a life's work to do that. So each one of those tiles is a picture of one of the clipper ships. And there's some of them there. The Belle of the West. There's a street named Belle of the West in Dennis, and I guess it's because of that. And also, yeah, so there's the balcony and everything. And when I went to this one, they have a Wi-Fi garden. Don't you love it? And it's cute. So when I went to this one, here we are. There was a teenager or young woman who was at the circulation desk, and it was quiet like this, and she was just reading a paperback, and I said, "Oh, this place is so beautiful, I love it here, I didn't even know it existed," and she went, yeah. And I felt like crying and laughing, because, the callousness of youth, just, does she know how lucky she is to be sitting in this beautiful library with such history and getting paid for it? And of course, I know the answer. No, she doesn't, and yeah. Oh, well, so this is, again, I thought this was much bigger. This is this library, of course, not anymore, but this was the Ossiville Village Library, had 2 really extra special founders. One was Thankful Ames, and the other, and she started this, not this one here, but she let people borrow books out of her dining room for years. And then, thank goodness for women, right? They do these little things. So, not that men don't do things, they do, but still. They really took care of the whole library situation for decades and decades. And they managed to make it work out. So anyway, 6 years later, a summer resident named William Lloyd Garrison Jr., who was way ahead of his time, because his father was a famous abolitionist, and he was also a proponent of African-American rights, and he even supported women's rights, which was unheard of at the time. And he opened this first Osterville Free Library. It was around the corner from here. And here we are, this is downstairs. The latest renovation increased it from 8,000 to 22,000 square feet. And I also think it has the best light fixtures. I love those geometric starbursts. I just think that it's amazing. And here's one of the other rooms here, which I don't know the name of. But it's not important. So Eastham is our last library. This is number 34. This is how it started in 1897, a little tiny box in the middle of nowhere. And it was expanded a few times, but it basically looked like this until 2017. And they spent $9 million to create this really gorgeous library. And what they did was they kept the little library in front. And in fact, before construction began, they picked it up with a crane and moved it somewhere so it wouldn't get into any mischief. And then when it was all done, they moved it back, and now it's one of the entrances. It's a little reading room, but I love that they kept a little library, and they also didn't want to dwarf it with this gigantic library, and it is big in the back. So they kept the scale like fanning out behind it. And here's the left, the right side of it. And then inside, it's just gorgeous. It, obviously all these windows and everything, red furniture and beautiful ceilings and stuff. Even yeah, right there where the B meets, it's, they have binoculars and a bird book, and it's on the shores of a little pond. So there's all kinds of neat stuff to look at. And that's when the sun is going down from outside. And then at night, I thought that was really beautiful. The night I did that, it was January. It was so cold, I thought I would die before I got back to my car. That was how cold that was. But that's okay, because it's beautiful. And let's see here. And this place also has all kinds of other fun things, like they have a turnip festival every year, which raises quite a lot of money for the library. Every November, the turnip costumes and every recipe you can possibly think of, some you would not want to try at all. I don't know anyone who actually likes turnips. There must be somebody, but I guess with enough butter and sugar, you can eat anything. But and they have these seeds that they have passed down over 100 years that make these special East Ham turnips. And of course, they claim East Ham is the only place it can grow because of the sandy soil. And that is the last library. So that's pretty much all I want to say. Just that I encourage everybody to go to all of these, because we miss a lot just by staying in our own little town. And maybe that's okay, but it's you guys who like libraries, you have to see some of these. They're fun and they're beautiful, and we have to keep them going forever. So they're the storehouses of all Cape Cod Mesquite. You know, there's other things too, but we can't lose the libraries, no matter how many times we can read books on Kindle, and I do that too. But it's just nothing like having a whole building dedicated to learning and being quiet and polite. So that's why I did this. That's all.